Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. This morning, my name is, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Gary Olnick, and I'm going to be leading you through the webinar this morning. And the topic of today's webinar is Commissions from the Ground Up. And what we're going to be doing is developing a Simply Accounting Intelligence report for commissions without having any prior knowledge of using the Simply Accounting Intelligence tool. So the first thing I wanted to do was introduce myself. I am a certified management accountant. I work a lot with Simply Accounting. I'm a SAN Gold partner and also a SAGE reporting specialist. A little bit of more information about myself, and just to get back to my next screen here. Some contact information. Now, if anybody would like to get a hold of me after the webinar, ask any additional questions, this is my contact information. Gary@accountsplus.ca is my email. My phone number is 289-838-4116, and my website is www.accountsplus.ca. I do develop reports and help partners develop reports as well. So if you see something that you have a question on today, please don't hesitate to contact me after the webinar. Just do a little bit of administrative things to start off. First of all, I just wanted to note that you're all on mute, and I'd like to keep you on mute so that we can go through the webinar and come to a logical conclusion. So not to say that I won't answer questions. If you have any questions, I'd like you to answer those or put those questions in the question panel as shown on the screen. You can see that to the right of the screen that you're signed on to for the webinar. So if you have a question, please type it in, and at the conclusion of the report generation, we'll look at those questions and I'll answer those in due course. And just in case you want to record notes, that's great. Some people find it more comfortable to do that, but also please note that the webinar is going to be recorded, and a link to the download will be sent to you following the presentation. So if you see a formula or you see a step and you miss the step, don't worry about it. You'll be able to go back and review the video and see exactly what we were doing. And thanks to SAGE for this webinar, we also have a special draw prize, which is a Fuji camera. And the draw will be done right after the presentation, and the winner will be announced in an email giving you the download link for the replay. So stay tuned for that. So very quickly, I'd like to just review the agenda for today's webinar. First of all, I want to quickly review SAGE Simply Accounting Intelligence functionality. We'll talk a little bit about what it is and how it works. And then we'll go in and we'll develop a report. We'll obtain raw commission data from Simply Accounting, and we'll use some parameters and filters and sorts, and we'll create an Excel spreadsheet that looks exactly like we want it to look. And we're going to use and create and format pivot tables and to calculate commissions. So first of all, please, if you've never used a pivot table, don't run for the door right now. We're going to show you how simple and easy it is to use a pivot table and a pivot chart, for that matter, to show the results of our report. Okay, so I'd just like to flip over now. Before we get started, I wanted to show you what our report's going to look like when we're finished. So this is going to be the final output. We're going to have a listing of all the salespeople in our organization, and in this case, I'm going to be using Universal Construction because that's the sample database that's available to everyone with any version of Simply Accounting. So you can go back and recreate the report that we're generating. So it'll show us how much commissions are payable, and we're going to select a period. In this case, I selected the period from March 1st through March 31st, 2015. And I'll show you how you can actually set up that date so that you don't have to go in and change it. It will automatically pull the data that you ran and tell you what information you're reporting on. And then For others, sometimes you just want to see what it looks like graphically. So we can use a pivot chart to do that, and that's what we're going to do at the side. So that's what we're going to do to start. And now I'd just like to jump right into it and go to Simply Accounting. So as again, I'm now using Universal Construction. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to navigate to the top reporting toolbar. If I click on that, I get all of my selections for reports. You'll see further down there's something called Say Simply Accounting Intelligence. And if I mouse over that, it brings me a drop-down menu. And I've got a number of folders here. Let's get that back. If I can get my computer to cooperate. There we are. So if I get that back and I go over one of the folders, it'll show demonstration as a folder, and it shows me I have a current month income statement. So I could actually go in and run my income statement that I generated from a previous exercise using that. So that's the way to navigate in. And before I get into using Simply Accounting Intelligence, I also just wanted to note that if you haven't purchased it, you still can go ahead and do this exercise. When you get Simply Accounting, Simply Accounting Intelligence is available to you on a trial basis for up to 30 days. And in fact, if you're using SAI in the trial mode and you run out of time, you can get an extension by giving the sales department a call, and they can extend it. Sometimes you're in the middle of developing things and other projects come up, and you get knocked off and you want to get back to it. So you can get that. And otherwise, if you see what you like, you can absolutely just purchase it online or contact the sales department to do that. Okay, so before I get right into the development, I just wanted to spend a moment just going through the nuts and bolts what Simply Accounting Intelligence is. Simply Accounting comes with some reports, and you can happily go out and run those reports anytime you want. However, you can sort them on current year, fiscal year, or you can go on previous fiscal year. You could do sort on accounts. But there's limitations. It is, and within a certain narrow framework, you can only slice and dice it so many ways. But if I want to go and be able to develop a report based on any data that I've got in Simply Accounting, then I need another tool. And Simply Accounting Intelligence is one of the tools that allows us to do that. So Simply Accounting Intelligence, it's an add-on, but what it does is it allows us to configure a report that goes into the database, and it pulls out the information that we want, and it sends it to Excel. So at the end of the day, we're working with an Excel spreadsheet, which is something that we all know and love, and we can do all kinds of wonderful things with it. So really, Simply Accounting Intelligence, if you look at it as a data extract tool, then that helps you understand what it's doing. And I think that'll become more evident as we go through and we see it in action. So to do that, let's go down to something called the Report Manager. So if I click on the Report Manager, it brings up an interesting looking screen. So I'm not going to get into too many of the details. I'm just going to highlight what we're going to be using today. On the left-hand side, we've got an object panel. And on the object panel, I've got a number of folders. The icon represents folders. So it tells me what kinds of folders I've got. So I've got some dashboard reports, I've got some demonstration reports, etc. And if I click on one of these reports, then I see all the various types of reports that I got in there, and I could just simply click on one of these and run the report, similar to what I did from the previous panel. And on the right-hand side, it tells me properties. Right now, there's not a whole lot going, because all I'm doing is looking at the report folder. In this case, it's the sales report folder, and it's telling me it's got a report folder ID of 3. It's a sales report, and if I wanted, I could put an extra description in there to give me an idea of what kind of reports are in this folder. But for this exercise, let's go back up, and I want to create a brand new folder because I don't want to mess it up with anything else that I've got. So I'm going to collapse my sales report. So if I go up to the home screen and I right-click, I have an option to add a folder. So I can go in and I can click on that folder, and I can say, let's call this my commission folder, because I want any and all commission reports that I want to go into this folder. So I do that, I click OK, and it's now brought up a folder. So if I click on that folder, there's not a whole lot there. It's an empty folder. Properties are still as what we saw before. So now I want to start generating my report. If I right-click on the folder, I have an option to go into Add a Report. So if I go and I add that report, it then asks me, do I want a standard report or do I want a union report? There's these are obviously two different selections that you can make. A standard report, think about it from the point of view is I'm looking to pull some data, and I'm only really looking for certain types of information. If I'm looking at the commission report, then I'm going to need some information on what's being invoiced, who sold it, how much the invoice is for, and then I can go ahead and calculate commissions based on that. But that's really sort of off of one sort of area of our database if you think about it. If you go and you look into Simply and you call up an invoice, pretty much all that information is on an invoice. Whereas if I wanted to say how much, what did I sell in this invoice, and I only want to pay a commission on it if I paid it, then I'm going to have to start going and looking into other areas, and then I might consider a union report. So in this case, let's just go ahead and let's say standard report. So now it's saying, what do I want to call that report? Let's say webinar commission report. So I type that name in, I enter it, and then it brings up something that says select a data container. I can expand this. Now I'd just like to spend a moment explaining what a data container is. Remember earlier I said that what this tool allows us to do is to go in and to draw out any data from Simply Accounting that we want from anywhere in any table. To help us do that, the system has been pre-configured to go in and pre-select certain sets of data according to what we may be looking to do. So if you think about the Simply database as a huge bowl of jelly beans, I don't know about you, purple ones preferably, then I can go in and I can say, I want the purple jelly beans for this commission report. So that's a subset of the overall bowl of jelly beans. So I put my little jar in there, I scoop up all the purple jelly beans, and I've got my container of purple jelly beans. So that's the concept. It's just a data extract that's been pre-configured for us. So I look down the various containers that I've got, and I see further down here that I've got a number that relate to sales analysis. And again, we're looking at information that gives me sales analysis, sales details on inventory and service. So that's the kind of information that we're going to need to calculate commissions. So we're looking at sales analysis. But then you say, well, hold on, there's more than one type of container here. Which one do I need? Well, there's various types of reports. We could develop consolidated reports. So if I'm running a number of companies and I wanted to do a calculation of commissions across all those companies, I could actually go in and use this container to help me do that. In this case, I'm only doing it on Universal Construction, so let's go ahead and say there's this other one, the sales invoice details, same, but Simply Accounting, and there is no consolidation connotation behind that. It does have something, and I'll expand it here and you can see it. It says AutoConnect. AutoConnect is nothing more than just sort of saying is that if I use this container, every time I go to run this report, it's going to go and get data for whatever Simply company I've got open. So it auto-connects to our open Simply database, and that's the one that I want to use for our commission report. So if I select on that, I click OK, then it says what columns do I want to have on my report? So now we've got our container, and these are all the various jelly beans, if you will, that are available in that container. So now I just simply need to go down and tell it what I need to do. And one of the things that you might think about whenever you're developing a report as a good practice is think about what your report's going to look like when you're finished. So if I'm doing a commission report, I know I want a salesperson, I know I want the date, probably the invoice number, so on and so forth. So if I have that sort of on a template or sketched out, that helps me when I get to this point and I say, let's go in and choose the columns that I want. So in this case, let's go in, and I know I want the date because I'm going to select on my date. I want the customer name. I want to know what the product code is. I want to know who the salesperson is, because that's how we're paying commissions. And I want to know what my total line sale amount is. So I define this. Be careful not to pick total line cost, because if you're dealing with a service, the cost may be 0. And I believe that is all we need. You may want to add invoice number as well. So I click OK and it all disappears, but not to worry. Now if I go back up, I've got my webinar commission report showing in my folder. I click on that, and then I notice that instead of just having a property tab, I have a whole number of other tabs. So the property tab, it's just giving us a little bit more information. It's telling me where it's storing a template, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about a template as we go on, but for now just note it as some additional information. Let's look at the columns. So now it's telling me that I've got some columns in here, and those should look familiar because those are the columns for the data that I told that I wanted in the report. So I told it I wanted customer name, I wanted the date, I wanted the invoice number, product code, salesperson name, and total line sale. So that's all good. There's a couple other tabs out here. We've got filters, we've got parameters, and sort fields, and aggregate filters, and there's nothing in there. I'm going to suggest that you may want to consider using some of this information. Remember I said that Simply Accounting Intelligence allows us to go, or at least it's going to output the report into Excel. And you could go into Excel and you can do things like sort and subtotal and do all kinds of things. But if you do it when you're extracting the report, then it's going to allow you to have to do less and have the report be more automatic when you get to the point of manipulating it in Excel, or you're looking at it in Excel. So if I look at the Filters tab, a filter is similar to what we see in Excel. It's really just applying some conditions to say, when I run this report, I want certain things to be screened out. So for example, if I know that in Simply Accounting, when I generate an invoice, there's various types of journal entries. And I know from the database that the journal entry type 8 is a regular sales transaction, and that's what I'm interested in this case. So if I go and click on Add on the side, it lets me choose filters. Just waiting for everyone's screen to update. So it gives me a filter selection. And I can scroll down and I'm saying I know that journal type is what I'm interested in here, and I want to click OK to get what that journal type should be. Then I have my comparators. So in this case I said I want my journal type to be equal to, and I said that I knew it was 8, and that information was available in the data dictionary. So I click that, and then I get a filter that says my journal type is equal to 8, which is what I want. Then I might say, yes, I want to pay commissions with this report, but in some cases I don't always have a sale associated with a commission, or sorry, with a sales rep. So if I haven't assigned a sales rep, I'm going to get a blank in that field. But I only want a report that shows me where I have salespeople. Scroll down, I can see that one of the filters, I can look at the salesperson's name. So I said, let my salesperson, and in this case, let not equal to as my comparator, and I'm just going to leave the comparison value as 0 or blank. So then my filter becomes the salesperson is not equal to blank. So if I don't have a salesperson associated with that invoice line, we won't be paying commission on that. Also, what about freight? I don't want to pay commission on freight. So I want to make sure that if I've got a product code equal to, sorry, excuse me, I don't want to see, product codes equal to freight. So I say, don't show me, or don't put anything to my report where the product code is freight. So product code is not equal to freight. We'll return everything where I've actually got a product or a service that I'm selling. And finally, and this one always is a little bit confusing, but we always like to eliminate blank fields or zeros in our reports. So we have a filter which is called zero line, which allows me to go in and basically not show me anything where I have a 0. Just cleans up the report. So I'm going to say zero line, in this case, it's equal to, and I can call up one of my selection categories here, which is non-zero line, which is what I want. Okay, so there I've got my filters. So every time I run the report, those filters will be applied. I won't get a chance to manipulate them in any way, shape, or form. Okay, quickly let's look at parameters. A parameter, similar to a filter, it allows us to manipulate the data. So for example, I said I wanted to pay commissions on a monthly basis. If I only want to pay for the month of March 2015, then I have to tell the program, or I can tell the program, that that's the only date that I want. You could run it out and then have to manipulate your Excel data to show exactly what you want. But again, I'm all about simplicity, automating the process. I'm lazy, I don't know about you. I don't want to have to do anything more than I have to do. So let's go in and say, in this case, I want my date to be greater than or equal to, and in this case, I can click on the system variable button. And there's some pre-programmed system variables that I can select for. And happily, there's one here that says month start date. So I can select that, OK, and I want my date to be less than or equal to a parameter, so I can go in, make it less than or equal to, and I'll go back to my parameters, and I'll call it my month end date. So I'll say OK. Now, you may have seen it flip by in that it called up my current system date, which is May 9th, May 10th. And you say, well, that's great, Gary, but you told me we're looking for 2015 as the data that we want for our commission report. True. That is a predefined parameter, but we can override that. So that's your default. And finally, sort. Again, just to keep things as straightforward as possible, let's say we just want to sort on salesperson name. So I just scroll down to my sort field. I can find my salesperson name. I click OK, and that gives me sort on that. And then just let's quickly add on the customer as well, just so that my data can be easily reviewed if the need arises. And on aggregate filters, it's a more advanced topic. If you wanted to group similar things, you could do that. I'm not going to cover that today. If you have any questions on that, that's something that you can contact me for, and we can discuss at a later point in time. So now, I've done a lot of configuration, but I still haven't seen any kind of a report. So now at the stage where we can go and we can actually run the report. So right now, it's all been configuration. So on the top toolbar, one of the ways that you can run a report is I've got this little green arrow. And I can say, if I mouse over it, it tells me that it's going to run the report. So I click on the run, and it starts to go out. My panel collapsed a little bit, and I got this sidebar that shows. It brought up the screen here that says enter report parameters. So remember we had parameters when we said my date was to be greater than or equal to a certain date, and that's my default, and less than or equal to a date, and that's my default. Well, I want my commissions to report from March 1st, 2015 to March 31st, 2015. So I put those in there, I click OK, and then the report continues to run. Nothing you need to do with this, it's just showing you where it's at and what it's trying to do. And at the completion of the report, it flips up and we are now in Excel. So it has automatically, if you look at the bottom of my screen here, it has shown us exactly that we're now in an Excel sheet. This is the standard format of raw data that comes out in the report. So on sheet 1, I've got the customer name, date, invoice number, etc. So this is all the information that I told Simply Accounting Intelligence that I wanted to see in my Excel report. And you'll notice that the date complies with everything that we've got, March 1st to 31st. It's sorted by customer name and salesperson. So it's got all the information in the fashion that we told it that we wanted it. This is a template. One of the things that I wanted to point out here was that when you run out raw data, so in this case I've got column A to column F, every time I run this report, I'm going to get my data in those columns. So being an Excel spreadsheet, I could put in a calculation column here and calculate my commission based on total line sale if I wanted to. And that would happily compute it, and we could get our numbers, and we could filter it out and get what we need to be able to pay the commissions. I'm going to do it a different way today using a pivot table, and the reason is because if I did that calculation here, it would do it, it would extend it down, and everything would be fine. But what if I ran this for another month, and my calculations went down to line 30? Well, in this area, it's only going to compute it down to line 26, and I would have a problem. So we want to keep these dynamic. And this is when dynamic, it means let's run this report and let's not have to touch anything and get the results that we need. So that's one of the reasons I'm going to use a pivot table today. The other thing I wanted to point out is on sheet 2, there's some information. Sheet 2 is some parameters. And it tells me when I ran the report, but it also tells me when I wanted the report data to start and when I wanted the report data to stop. So that's some information that I can use in other parts of my report. And then sheet 3 is a blank table, or it's a blank sheet, I should say. So now I want to use this data to create my commission calculations. So fasten your seatbelts. Here's where we're going to use a pivot table. It's not that tough. So you click on anywhere in the data set. I click on Insert, and it brings up a pivot table selection. So if I say Insert Pivot Table, I get a dialog box. And it says create a pivot table and select my data range. In this case, it's highlighted all of my data, and it will create my pivot table on that data. Again, one of the problems that you have is that if I was to change my data, and I use this as my selection to create my pivot table, what if my data went down to F100? And I said that this was the range that I wanted to select my pivot table data from. Well, it wouldn't select it, and my data would be wrong. Well, we've got a way around that. If you're familiar with named ranges, you can actually use a named range, which is basically a calculation within Excel that tells you where it wants you to extract the data from. If I hit F3, I pull up the name ranges that have been defined within this spreadsheet. And I've got one called raw data, and this comes through with Simply Accounting Intelligence. So you don't have to know how to create this name range. It's something that's already pre-programmed. But if I select this and have OK, it now says it's going to select from Sheet 1 raw data. What that's going to let me do is no matter what size of my data set, it's going to automatically go and pull it. So that's what I mean by making it dynamic. I don't have to tell it anything more. It's going to automatically know, go and get all that data and calculate my commissions on that data. Okay, then I need to tell it where I want this pivot table to be placed. You could place it on this sheet. Again, if you do place it on this sheet, make sure you don't put it between columns A and F, because if you do, next time I run this report, it's going to overwrite my pivot table and things just won't work out at all. Better practice is to say, let's take a look at a different location. I said sheet 3 hasn't got anything going on it, so why don't I just select C5, and we'll do that. Just click OK, and now I've been flipped over to sheet 3. Sheet 1's still there. Sheet 2's still there. Now contains my pivot table data. Okay, a very simple pivot table is all we need for this exercise. The way to do that is I can drag and drop. I want to know who the salesperson is. I want that in my rows. So if I click on the salesperson name and drag it down to the row labels, and this is within the table field list, it automatically populates my salespeople's name. Okay? Then I need to have my total line sale. So if I drag that into the sum of values, it brings in the values of my total line sale. Now in this case, it says the sum of, but I'm only extracting one line for each each piece of raw data. So in a case where I've got Bruno Boulanger, for example, it's just going to total that and sum it together. And that's all you have to do to set up your pivot table. One other thing that I need to do, though, is we've been talking all day about calculating a commission, but so far we haven't done anything with commissions. So let's add the commission calculation to our pivot table. So if I click anywhere in the pivot table, I click on Options. On my top toolbar, the top ribbon, I see that I got a selection for fields, items, and sets. Click on that, and one of the options is Calculated Field. So I click on Calculated Field, and it brings up a dialog box about inserting a calculated field. So the first thing it's asking me to do is, what's the name of my field? So let's call that Commissions Payable. So that'll be the title at the top. Then I need to tell it what the calculation is. So in this case, let's say that my calculation is we need to calculate the commissions off of my total line sale. So I click OK. Oops. I can double click, or I could have clicked Insert. And that's going to pull the value from the sum of the total line sale, and I want to multiply that, so star being the multiplier, and in this case, let's say we're paying our salespeople 6%, so 0.06. Then I can say OK, and it automatically adds my commission calculation. And if you look at that, you do 190 times 6%, and it's $11.40 of commission that we're going to be paying Howard Ashcroft. Now, that obviously is fairly simplistic, and a lot of organizations might say, yeah, that's great, Gary, but I pay 6% on inventory items, but I also have service items, and I pay 3%. That can be done. It is a little bit more advanced. The way that is done is we put it in sheet 1 as an additional column, and we can bring it forward to our pivot table. If you'd like some assistance on that, I can certainly guide you through that. But I just want at this point to let you know that it can be done. But again, to keep it as straightforward as possible for today's purposes, let's just go with the 6%. Okay, so that's the raw data, but obviously that's really not the kind of report that we want to be circulating around. It doesn't really look too good. If we were to print this off and send it to accounting, they might say, well, what in the world are you talking about? You want us to pay them what and how come? So let's clean it up a bit. If I go and click on the row table cells, this is an editable column. So I can say salesperson. Tells me exactly what it is. And here, instead of saying sum of total line sale and going through the whole explanation that I went to, let's just say total sales. And finally, obviously, the most important one is commission payable. And I can, being in Excel, I can simply go to my home and I can center it across. Number formats, that looks pretty ugly. We'd like to see dollars and cents, being that it is dollars and cents. So let's take a look. And in a pivot table, formatting is a little bit different, but just follow these steps and you'll be okay. So if I go to my sales value, there's a drop down. And there, at the bottom, you see that there's a value field setting. If I click on value field setting, it brings up all the various settings. I can click on my number format, and it says, what would I like my numbers in this column to look like? Well, they're currency. So let's make them currency. And I'll click OK. So now my total sales looks proper for a currency value, and I'll go and I'll do something similar for my commission payable. I'll click on commissions payable, and now it's looking a whole lot better. I don't need to keep my pivot table list up. I can close it out. It doesn't go away. I can always just go back up to my options. If I click field list, I can always bring it up and manipulate my report. And in fact, what I'm doing here is I'm going to say, you know what, it's great that I've got total sales, but if I'm going to send this report off to accounting and have payroll enter it into the system for payment, I don't really care if they see the amount of sales that's there. They just need to know how much to pay for commission. So let's collapse that. You can always bring it back. It's there. So that's my commissions payable, but it doesn't tell me who the company is. It doesn't say that it's Universal Construction, and more importantly, it doesn't tell me what period I'm paying my commissions for. So let's do that. Let's put a title. Let me just go to the top here. So let's put in that it's Universal Construction, and it's commissions payable. Okay, and now I want to enter the date. So you could simply type in the date, but the problem is the next time I run the report, it may not, or at least it won't show me the date. So what we want to do here is a little bit of a trick. We want to use the parameters that we specified when we ran the report to tell us what dates we've calculated our commissions for. So I do that through a little bit of a formula. And I'll type it out, and if you miss anything in this, again, the session's being recorded, so you can always go back and review how it's been done if you're not used to using these types of formulas. So first of all, I'm saying it's a formula, so let's make it equal. I want to put in a text, so let's put in my double quotation, and for the period, and I'm going to put 3 spaces right after that, and you'll see why in a second. So for the period, close that off, and now I want to go out and get a date. I'm going to use a concatenate feature to do this. We're still within the same expression, so let me hit Shift 7, which gives me the AND command, and now I'm going to say use a text function, And the syntax for a text function requires me to put a left bracket out there. So what that's saying is, go out and get a value and tell me how you want it to look. So let me go to sheet 2. I'm saying pick that value. And then I'm going to go back and say I want it to look like, and then because it is a text, I want to say that's my month, space, day, and year. And I'll close the bracket. Okay, so that will come, when that comes back, it'll say for the period March 1st, 2015, but I want to say where it goes to. So let's put another concatenate and bracket. I want to put 2, and I put some spaces, because if I didn't put spaces, it would be scrunched up against the year, and it wouldn't look very nice. And now I need to tell it the remaining date. So I need to concatenate one more time, text, left bracket, that date, and make it look like month, 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 day, day, year, 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 year. Close it off, close the bracket, and then hit return. And then it gives me my formula in the fashion that I want to see it. So I can make that bold, I can increase the font, and that gives me the title. This is now a dynamic title. Whenever I run this report, it's going to pull my parameters and it's going to tell me what these commission payable values represent. Okay, finally, to make it look like what we had before, let's add a pivot chart. Just because some of us would like to see it graphically and see who's making the money, or at least giving us some information as to how to go back. So I click on my pivot table, I look on my options, now I've got an option that says pivot chart. So I can click on that, and it gives me a dialog box that says, what kind of a chart would you like? And in this case, I said I wanted a pie chart. So I click on my pie, click OK, and it automatically throws up, probably not the best terminology, puts up my pivot chart. I can drag it down to make sure that I've got all of my sales people visible. So it looks pretty good, but I can clean it up. For example, I don't necessarily want these little bars there, so I could go back and right-click, and I could say, hide all my field buttons on the chart. So I can get rid of that. Nice little pie chart, but really doesn't give me a whole lot of information. So if I was to right-click and say, let's add some data labels, it will go back and it will tell me exactly what the commission is. So it will tell me, so for Janice, who seems to be doing really well, $4,500 of commission. She's absolutely the star for this month. But is she the star? We can actually go back to my sheet 1, and we can see where Janice is, and see, well, that was one big deal. Good for her, but did she spend all of her time on that deal, and has she got any others in the pipeline? And while we're at it, sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 is kind of clunky, so why don't we rename our sheets? So why don't we say this one is my commission raw data. Say this is my parameters. And obviously this would be my commission calculations. Okay, and then finally, let's just clean up the title a bit, because that doesn't really tell us what we're looking at. It's commission distribution, which is a little bit more explanatory. Okay, so what I could do at this point is this is an Excel sheet, right? So if I was to say I want to send this off to accounting, so let me save this to a library. I've got a folder that says commissions payable. I could file save as, and I could save it to commissions March 2015. And I could pull that worksheet up anytime I wanted to. It would have this data, but it's not dynamic. Again, the whole reason that we're using Simply Accounting Intelligence is so that anytime I want commissions from now on, all I have to do is run the report. I don't have to change anything. But think about what we've been doing. We developed an extract, we put it off to Excel, and then we've been fooling around with Excel for the longest time, and we've got a little bit of a problem. Simply Accounting Intelligence doesn't know what we've done in Excel. So we have to go and say, here's what my spreadsheet needs to look like, and this is what I want you to do every time I go and run it. So now if I go back into Simply Accounting Intelligence, I click on my report that we were working on, our webinar commission report. If I right-click and I look further down, I get an option called Create a Link Template. What this is going to do is it's going to take my Excel spreadsheet that I've developed and associate it with, so that every time I go and run the report, it's going to look exactly as we wanted it to. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that the report is on the sheet that we want to have displayed when we run the report. Double check on the name of the report, because it's asking me, you've got two reports open, so which one do you want me to use as the template? In this case, it's book 1. So I click OK. Then it gives me a warning that it's going to put the parameters on the second sheet. Remember I said it always put the data to the first sheet, the parameter to the second sheet, and in fact we calculated some dates off of the second sheet. So yeah, we want the parameters on the second sheet. Please go ahead and do that. It gives you options. You can go back and do all this back to Excel 2003, but I'll warn you now, pivot tables and pivot charts are doable, but it's not the most straightforward thing or to be doing those in Excel 2003. I'd highly recommend doing them in 2007 or higher. So I'm going to go ahead and click 2007. It's saying, what do I want to call the template? By default, it calls it the same as the report, which is good practice. So we'll just go ahead. And then finally it says, when you save pivot tables, right now there's a lot of data in there. Do I want to save the data with it, or do I want to just save the format? And really, I don't care about the data as long as I can rerun this and get what I need. So let's go ahead and say, it's asking me, do I want to switch off the data pool? And I'm saying yes, go ahead and do that. So then it goes ahead, and my screen's flickering, and that's supposed to happen. And it says the template was created successfully and linked to the report. Okay. But then I look back and say, well, hold on, that was my final report example. And what happened to the report that I was working on? It's gone. Not to worry, I can rerun it. So let's go and rerun it. And I'll use the same person. So let's go back, and now it's saying dates, March 1st, 15, March 31st, 15. We'll let it run out. And it's still running. And if I go back to Simply Accounting Intelligence, I can see that it's still running. It had a status bar at the bottom, and my screen had been collapsed. It's now gone back out to full screen. So that tells me that my report is completed. So that should look familiar. That's exactly what we told it to compute. So I saved it as a template. I went back out and I regenerated. Now I've got a template, and the only instructions that I had to give it were March 1st, 2015 to March 31st, 2015. And there's also something else I noticed. I had showed you what I wanted my report to look at. and I neglected to do this. Again, this is Excel, so what if I like conditional formatting? I just learned about conditional formatting. Ah, that's pretty cool. Why don't I use it? So what if I wanted to, say, apply some conditional formatting to these cells? In my home screen, I could go to conditional formatting and go to my data bars and say, give me a gradient fill. And by doing this, it shows me the relative value of commissions paid with these bars. Now, one little trick you have to do in a pivot table, when you add that, you have to tell it, and there's a little icon at the bottom right that always put it for all of the data in that column. Now, for this to stick, I would have to go back and create and link my template one more time. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that right now, but I do want to show you something else. So let's go back, and I just want to prove something. So let's take my webinar commission report, and let's rerun it. This time, let's run it for a different date. So let's run for February 1st, 15 to February 28th, 15, and I'm not sure whether that was a leap year or not. There is a leap year, I guess it's coming in the future. So let me run it out, and let's see what we get. Okay, wait for everyone's screens to finish refreshing. Okay, there's our report. So we've got the same look, but we've now got it for February 1st to February 28th. And there's my commission amounts. And that's what the distribution looks like. And that's how automatic it is. I didn't have to do anything except tell it what the beginning date was and the end date. A fully automatic, time-saving report that is free from error. And in fact, I said I was lazy. If you're like me, I don't even want to have to worry about going to run it. So if I decide to take a long weekend at the end of the month, right, if you're an accountant, that's a joke. But I don't have to worry about run the commission report on my to-do list. SAI has some advanced features that would allow you to actually go in, and I can schedule this report to run and send it to my inbox in my email system. So if it's the month of, right now we're in May, come June 1st, I can queue this up to run on my data, send me an email on June the 1st. I can go in, take a look at the raw data, verify that everything looks okay, send it off to payroll, and all my salespeople get paid in the next pay run and are happy and continue to go out and sell all the product that they need to sell. So that's some pretty interesting features that are available to you with SAI. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions. I don't see any in the question panel. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the dialog box, and I'd be happy to answer them. While I'm waiting to see if there are any questions, I'd like to also just note that if you have any other questions that come up after the webinar, or unless you're reviewing the recording, please don't hesitate to contact me. I can reach to Gary at accountsplus.ca. And also I would welcome, once you're used to using the accounting intelligence, if you see a report that you would like that's not there and you're not sure about how to go about getting it, I certainly look forward to any questions that I could assist with on that venue. Or if there's any reports that you can think of that you would like to see generated and maybe included in the library as a predefined report, I can see what I can do talking to people at Sage and see what we can do about that. Okay, so there's a question about whether can I run the report for a previous year. Yes, the report will run from any data at any time within your Simply Accounting database. So to illustrate, I can go back and let's rerun the report. And this time when the parameter comes up, I'm going to just say, let's go from 2012 right up to 2015. And it's taking its time, or we're just waiting for it to pass. Okay, so there's the report that I just ran. So now my parameter date is May 1st, 2012, all the way up to May 31st, 2015. And that gives me, obviously the numbers are a lot bigger, as you would expect them to be, and we get a better appreciation for who's been performing over time. And it gives me all of the information that supports the calculations. Okay, another question. Can you compare this year versus last year by month? Yes, you can do that. You would have to change the format of the report, but it is certainly within the capabilities of Simply Accounting Intelligence and as it exports out into Excel. Okay, I see that we're coming up on the hour. So I'd like to just remind everybody that you're going to be receiving an email with the recording of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I can help clarify that. And last but not least, I wanted to wish everybody good luck in the draw for the digital camera that's going to be awarded for one of today's attendees to this webinar. So thank you very much for your time. I know that everybody's got a lot of things going, and I really do appreciate that you took the time to attend the webinar. I hope that you've learned some interesting facts about using Simply Accounting Intelligence to generate a commission report from the ground up.